everyone. Welcome to the Less is More Education podcast with your host, Steve Flores, where I review the research that is most relevant to pedagogy and education policy to help teachers in their ongoing learning. And today we're going to discuss why California is number one, but not in a great way. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. To keep the podcast going, like and subscribe to the podcast on you can do it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. You can also find me on Instagram and on YouTube at lessismore.education. And if you'd like to contribute to the podcast, you can contribute through Patreon at patreon.com/lessismoreeducation. And today what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about why California has just been announced as number one in illiteracy in the United States. So this is coming from a report on this website called Capital Weekly, or news organization by Will Shuck. And the title is called California Shockingly Has the Lowest Literacy Rate of Any State. So they write nearly 1 in 4 people over the age of 15 lack the skills to decipher the words in this sentence. Only 77% of adults are considered mid to highly literate, according to nonpartisan data crunchers at World Population Review. And they go on to say, and this is going to be important later on, in New Hampshire, the most literate state in the country, only about 5 out of 100 lack English reading and writing skills. Its literacy rate hovers near 95%. So we have two different systems here, right? We have California and we have New Hampshire. One has a very high literacy rate. The other one has a very low literacy rate. And the question is, well, why? If you go on to read the paper, they basically talk about how schools are underfunded and there's not enough and that California in particular is underfunded. And I don't really know where they're basing that off of, because if you look at our rankings and how much we are spending by state, all in all, California ranks 19th, right? So we are at the top, quarter of spending, but we're at the very bottom of results. And this is something that I've spoken about over and over again, and it keeps happening over and over again. Like spending doesn't really seem to be the problem here. There's a wide variety of problems. And the way I think about it is the main problem that we have in California is it's kind of like the same problem that you have when you start stacking Lego blocks on top of each other, right? You keep stacking. You try to see like, all right, how high of a tower can I make? Eventually, that tower is going to become unstable and it's going to fall down and it's going to crash to pieces. And that's what I feel like California is right now, is we just keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding and adding to our education system without ever thinking about, like, should we be making things this complicated? Should we be, spending this much money? And the answer to me is, well, if we keep spending more and more money and we keep getting horrible, horrible results, why don't we try something else? Okay, so let's go on to, why is it that our literacy rate is so low? So I'm going to go on to another report this is on edweek.org, so Education Week. And there's an article there that's called Data, How Reading is Really Important or Really Being Taught by Leanna Lewis. And in this article, they really delve into, well, why is it that for fourth graders, only 35% of them are reading proficiently? And that's in the United States. That's us as a whole, right? And because, California already doesn't have a very high literacy rate, we're probably, on the lower rung of that, right? We probably have, I think the last time I read, we're only like 50% proficient in reading, which is, no, it was lower than 50%. But that's 50% would be like already horrendous. Okay. Now, when they started, this article really is really nice because they start to actually talk to teachers and ask, well, how are you teaching students to read, right? And so they asked K2 and special ed teachers if a student who is learning to read comes to a word that he or she doesn't know, what do you tell them or to do first? And 59% of them said, well, sound it out. 1% of the respondents said, just skip it. Next is 13% say use context clues to make a good guess, and 27% said look at pictures. Well, what? There's the shocking part about that is why aren't all of them saying to sound it out? And the reason why I say to sound it out is that if you look at the research, it's pretty clear that phonics training to students is what builds literacy, right, and understanding. And so there's all these other techniques that are being pushed that, and what I like about this article is to go all right, well, where are you learning these techniques, these alternative techniques, right? So when that's the second question, the follow-up question is, where did you learn most of what you know about reading instruction? And professional development coaches in my district, that's number one, 33%. Next is my personal experience with students in the classroom, 17%, other 15%. My school provided curriculum or program, 14%, my own research, 8%, the teachers and mentors, 7%, pre-service training, 5%. So a lot of teachers are just saying well, this is just how my district is pushing literacy or pushing me to teach my students. And so there's a huge percentage that are just being taught the wrong way. And a lot of this falls at the feet, if you read later on into the article, of education programs, right? And these are state funded or private. It doesn't really seem to matter. I even remember reading an article saying that in California, all of the Cal State pre-service training programs were considered poor as rated from each other, right? So Cal State Fullerton will rate Cal State Bakersfield and go yeah, your education system sucks. And they would say that back to Cal State Fullerton. So then I don't know what to make of that. That's pretty horrible. Right. And so the big question is well, why are these these institutions that are training our teachers, why are they doing such a bad job? That's a big question, right? And so the article then goes on to asking education professors who teach reading, do you teach the 3 cueing system, which is meaning, structure, visual or semantic, syntactic, graphophonic, right? So these are these other alternative methods of reading. And 65% of them said yes, 35% of them said no, right? That, most of them should have probably answered no if they knew anything about phonics training. So this is kind of ridiculous here. And when they further asked a follow-up question to education professors who teach reading, they said, all right, select your agreement or disagreement with the following statement. It is possible for students to understand written text with unfamiliar words if they don't have a good grasp of phonics, right? 11% said strongly disagree. 34% said disagree. 50% of them said that they agree, and 6% said that they strongly agree. That is bonkers to me. Why are they saying that? What are they basing that off of? Doesn't really make sense to me, right? And there's some evidence that a lot of what's going on seems to be teacher preferences. And I'm going to give you a very specific example. And this example comes from Oakland. So we're going to make this about, make it personal, or not personal, but specific to California, because that's where I'm highlighting. And this is going to be a Time Magazine article written by Belinda Lucombe. And it's called Inside the Massive Effort to Change the Way Kids Are Taught to Read. Okay, and it starts off with this story about a teacher in Oakland named Kareem Weaver. And it starts off as a teacher in Oakland, California. Kareem Weaver helps struggling fourth and fifth grade kids learn to read by using a very structured phonics-based reading curriculum called Open Court. It worked for the students, but not so much for the teachers. For 7 years in a row, Oakland was the fastest gaining urban district in California for reading, recalls Weaver, and we hated it. Okay, that should tell you a lot of what's going on already. So why did they hate it? The teachers felt like curriculum robots and pushed back. This seems dehumanizing. This is colonizing. This is the man telling us what to do, says Weaver, describing their response to the approach. So we fought tooth and nail as a teacher group to throw that out. It was replaced in 2015 by a curriculum that emphasized rich literacy experiences, those who wanted to fight for social justice. They figured that this new progressive way of teaching reading was the way, he says, right? That's how it started. Let's see how it ended. Right now, Weaver is heading up a campaign to get his old school district to reinstate many of the methods that teachers resisted so strongly, specifically systematic and consistent instruction in phonemic awareness and phonics. In Oakland, where you have 19% of black kids reading, that can't be maintained in society, says Weaver, who received an early and vivid lesson in the value of literacy in 1984 after his cousin got out of prison and told him the other inmates stopped harassing him when they realized he could read their mail to them. It has been an unmitigated disaster. In January 2021, the local branch of the NAACP filed an administrative petition with Oakland Unified School District to ask it to include explicit instruction for phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension in its curriculum. Right. So what basically happened is teachers were not happy teaching phonics. And when they got unhappy, they fought to get rid of it. And then the test scores and the outcomes for the students, boom, plummeted. And now some of them are going like, yeah, maybe we should go take a look at that. Now, that seems to be a trend, right? It seems to be that a lot of what's being taught in education systems, so in higher ed, right, which prepare our teachers, which get them credentialed, are telling them like, hey, you know what? Phonics, it's all fine and all, but have you seen these other things that we're trying out, right? And those are having disastrous effects. And they're having disastrous effects in places that have really low income communities, right? So Oakland is one of those. And that is insane because what you're doing is you're not catering to the needs of the students, you're catering to the needs of teachers. And if we want things to change, we need to stop catering to the needs of teachers and start catering to the needs of students. It makes no sense whatsoever to have an education system that prioritizes the needs of the teachers over the needs of the students. And that's a tough pill to swallow if you've been working in education. It's hard. And moreover, there's all this talk on how underfunded we are. And I don't see where those comments are getting their basis from. If you look at how much the United States spends on our education system, I think the average is somewhere around $15,000 per pupil, right? You look at the top education systems around the world. So you're looking at Singapore, you're looking at Canada, you're looking at Finland. All of them are spending around, 10 to, I think the highest one that I saw was 13,000 per pupil, right? Places like Finland spend less than $10,000 per pupil, right, per year. And so we're spending a lot more money and getting way fewer results. Why? Well, it's the Lego blocks, right? We have all these structures and all these pieces that we've added to our education system that make it extremely inefficient and unstable. And one day, all of this is going to come falling down. And there's already hints of it because there's a lot of parents that are pulling their students out of public education and homeschooling them, or putting them into like charter schools, or putting them into private schools because they're not happy with the way education is going. And honestly, I wouldn't be, I'm not that happy either if we're prioritizing the needs of college professors and teachers over the needs of our students, right? So that's a disaster all on its own right there. Okay, so let's go back to New Hampshire, right? Because they obviously are doing something. So I decided to go look up the Department of Education and found their reading standards in New Hampshire. Okay, let me read it to you. So these are the Common Core state standards for English language arts and literacy in history, social sciences, science, and technical subjects. So this is foundational skills, K through 5, and we're just going to look at kindergarten. So they have a section that's titled Phonics and Word Recognition. So students should know how to apply grade level phonics and word analysis skills in decoding words. Demonstrate basic knowledge of one-to-one letter sound correspondences by producing the primary sound or many of the most frequent sounds for each consonant. Associate the long and short sounds with common spellings, graphemes, for the 5 major vowels. Read common high-frequency words by sight, right? The, of, to, you, she, my, is, are, do, does, for example, and distinguish between similarly spelled words by identifying the sounds of the letters that differ. Why is New Hampshire doing so well? They incorporated the research showing that phonics is the best way to teach reading into their standards, right? They prioritize the needs of their students over the needs of their teachers or the wants of their college professors. And if you want to do that in California, good news is you can. If you look at the Common Core standards in California, they explicitly say that these are the things that students should know, but we're not going to tell you how to teach them, right? There's no guidance on how to do things like teaching certain things like reading in California. That means that you, as a teacher in California, get to choose how you teach your students reading. And if your school district is pushing towards something other than phonics, you can make your voice strong by saying, hey, there is research out there that shows that phonics is the best. Look at New Hampshire. They've incorporated it into their standards, and they're number 1 in literacy, right? So we should do that as a district. We should do that as a school. We should prioritize the needs of our students over the needs of us and the needs of college professors or whoever else that has other preferences. Right? And that's what you can do. That's how you can improve things at your school district. And, and push and have a voice, and maybe even get your local union in on it and see like, hey, can we get this for everyone? Can we push, can we get a phonics system? Because that is what the research shows does the best for teaching reading and literacy. And once you know reading and literacy, all your other outcomes in life become much, much greater, right? And that's one of these like key skills that students need to learn in order to be successful. They have cascading effects, right? Because if you know how to read, now you're understanding how to interpret text. Now you're understanding how to read questions in math class. Now you're understanding how to do well on standardized tests. And it has all these cascading effects, but we have to stick to what we know works, right? So all this other stuff of like, oh, there's sight words and there's like looking at pictures and, there's looking at context clues and all that. No. That needs to end. And we need to go back to basics. We need to go, get re-hooked on phonics. Okay. And that has been, and we're going to do a short episode today. Sorry I wasn't able to record last week. I got sick and I was, I think I got 2 illnesses. I recovered from one, got another one. And I'm going to have a longer episode ready for you guys next week that I'm excited to talk about. And that talks about like what are called, one of the things that's related to what we're talking about today called trifecta skills. And these are, what are the skills that are like fundamental, right, to understanding other things, and malleable, things that anyone can learn, and things that students wouldn't have learned anyway, right, that will have the largest impact in their lives. And phonics is one of those things. Okay. All right. So thank you for listening to Less is More Education podcast. If you would like to support the podcast, again, for less than the cost of a coffee a month, go visit patreon.com/Less is More Education. If you prefer reading about the research most relevant to pedagogy and education policy, go visit me on lessismoreeducation.substack.com. And again, you can always find me on Instagram and YouTube at lessismore.education. Thank you very much.